She stood at the edge of the community center just before sunset, holding a small cardboard sign. No one stopped. No one looked. But he did. An older man in a long coat, walking home from the library, paused, not because of the words, but because of the silence in her eyes. Need a dad for the father-daughter dance. He didn't speak. He didn't film it. He simply knelt, looked at her, and said two words that would ripple through a neighborhood. I'll go. But what happened after? No one expected. Her name was Zara Mensah, 10 years old, with braids wrapped in golden threads and a quiet strength that teachers noticed but rarely praised. She lived in a modest home in East Baltimore, where neighbors still called each other auntie and uncle, and Sunday mornings smelled of jollof rice and church hymns. Her mother, Nia, worked nights as a nurse, loving fiercely, surviving bravely, but grief had settled into the walls of their home. Zara's father had passed when she was 5, a sudden illness, no warning, no goodbye. Just a photo on the dresser and a silence where a voice used to be. At the community center, the annual father-daughter dance was the most anticipated night of the year. Girls giggled about dresses, practiced steps in the parking lot, counted down the days. But Zara stayed quiet. She didn't complain. She didn't cry. She simply watched. Until one afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table, cut a piece of poster board, and wrote those 6 words. Need a dad for the father-daughter dance. She didn't plan to show it, but when the list of attendees went up and her name wasn't on it, something in her broke, softly, silently. That evening, she stood outside the fence, holding the sign like a whisper into the wind. And that's when he appeared. His name was Kwame Boateng, not a celebrity, not a politician, just a 60-year-old archivist at the city's historical library, a man who had lived a life of quiet purpose. Widowed 12 years prior, he had buried his wife after a long illness, and since then, chose solitude not out of loneliness, but out of love that never fades. He walked the same route every evening, past the community center, through the park, back to his small book-filled apartment. He noticed things others didn't: a missing flower from a garden, a child walking home alone, the way light fell on the pavement at 5:47 p.m. And on this day, he saw Zara. Not just her sign, but her. The way she held her breath, the way her fingers curled around the cardboard, the loneliness that wasn't loud, but deep, like a river under stone. He didn't see a story, he saw a child. And in that moment, something ancient and true stirred in him, the instinct to step in, not as a hero, but as a man who remembered what it meant to be seen. Kwame didn't hesitate. He walked over, knelt to meet her at eye level, and said, I'll go. Zara blinked. You don't even know me. I know you need a dance partner, he said, and I know how to waltz. A small laugh escaped her, the first in weeks. He helped her fold the sign, tucked it into his coat pocket, and walked her home, one slow step at a time. When Nia opened the door, she was cautious, a mother's instinct. But Kwame didn't offer grand promises. He simply said, Ma'am, your daughter has a right to joy. If you're okay with it, I'd be honored to walk her into that hall. Nia studied his eyes, steady, calm, kind, and nodded. The next few days were quiet. Kwame went to work. Zara went to school. But something had shifted. He began leaving small things at her doorstep: a book of African folk tales, a pressed violet in a frame, a note that read, Dads remember. No fanfare, no cameras, just presence. When the night of the dance arrived, Zara wore a deep green dress that shimmered like leaves in the sun. Nia braided her hair with red and gold thread, a tradition from her grandmother's village in Ghana. And at the door, Kwame waited, in a simple navy suit, a rose pinned to his lapel, and in his hand, a single black stone, polished smooth. It was my wife, he said. She said stones carry memory. I think she'd want you to have it inside the hall. The music played, lights twirled, and fathers spun daughters in laughter. Some parents whispered when they saw Kwame, not in judgment, but in quiet awe. One teacher later said, I've worked here 15 years. I've never seen a man walk in with such gentle pride. They danced, Not flashy, not fast, but with a rhythm that felt like a lullaby. And when the song ended, Zara looked up and said, "You're not my dad, but you felt like one." Kwame's voice cracked. "That's the highest honor I've ever been given." But the story didn't end there. A week later, the community center director called. "There are 5 other kids who didn't attend," she said. "Some lost parents. Some have none. Some just don't feel like they belong." Kwame listened. Then he said, "What if we made it a tradition? Not just a dance, a circle of fathers." The director paused. "You'd lead it." "I'll start," he said. "Others will join." And they did. Retirees, veterans, teachers, coaches, men from the neighborhood, black, brown, young and old, began signing up. Some had daughters, some had none, but all carried the same truth. Fatherhood isn't only blood, it's choice. The turning point came not at the dance, but 6 months later, during a quiet evening gathering. The community center honored Kwame with a small plaque for showing us that love is an action. He didn't want it, but when Zara placed it in his hands, he accepted it, not for himself, but for every man who had ever chosen to stay. He didn't give a speech, but someone asked him, "Why did you do it?" He looked at the circle of children and said, "Because I remembered what it felt like to be invisible, and I knew that one act of seeing someone, truly seeing them, could change their whole story." A hush fell, not out of respect, but out of recognition. They weren't just honoring a man, they were remembering a truth. The world is changed not by the loudest voices, but by the ones who show up in the quiet. Today, the Circle of Fathers continues, now in 3 Baltimore neighborhoods and spreading to cities across the mid-Atlantic. Men gather not to fix broken families, but to expand the meaning of family. They don't replace fathers. They add love where it's needed. Zara still keeps the black stone on her desk. Now 12, she speaks at youth events, saying, "You don't need a title to be someone's hero. You just need to care." Kwame still walks the same evening route. But now children wave. Neighbors greet him by name. And sometimes a young girl will run up and say, "Will you walk me home?" And he always says yes. This story teaches us that kindness is not weakness. It is the quietest form of strength. That fatherhood is not limited by biology. It is defined by commitment. And that a single moment of seeing someone, truly seeing them, can rewrite their story. So before you scroll away, ask yourself, who have I overlooked? Who in my life is holding a silent sign, hoping someone will say, "I'll go"? Because the next quiet act of courage, the one that changes a life, might begin with you.